Meet John. He found himself alone on a remote island. This was not a planned vacation. A ferocious storm had hit his small boat. Then, the terrible crash of the wreck. Now, survival is his top priority, every single day. But just finding food and water, merely existing, isn't enough for a man like John. He possesses a deep well of grit, an unyielding spirit. He craved something more than just waiting for a rescue that might never come. He needed a tangible way out, a path to reclaim his life. The vast, endless sea surrounded him. It was a formidable barrier, a constant reminder of his isolation. Yet within that very barrier he saw a potential path. An audacious idea began to form in his mind, a wild, almost impossible idea. He would build a ship. This isolated patch of land, this island, was now John's entire world. He understood that he must learn its secrets, every hidden detail. He needed to know every type of tree, every contour of the rock formations, every subtle shift in the wind and tides. John had been an engineer in his former life, a life that now felt a million miles away. Those crucial skills, long dormant and buried deep within his memory, slowly began to resurface like forgotten tools being unearthed. He knew he needed a meticulously crafted plan, a solid, foolproof plan. In this unforgiving environment, there was absolutely no room for critical mistakes. One wrong calculation, one misjudged action could cost him his life, his only chance. He began to sketch his designs in the damp sand day after day, refining, thinking, calculating every angle, every joint. The powerful dream of escape became his constant fuel. It was the force that pushed him through the long, lonely nights, filled with strange jungle sounds and his own anxieties. It was the reason he woke before the first rays of the sun painted the eastern sky. He could vividly see the ship in his mind's eye. This wouldn't be a flimsy raft, easily broken by the waves. No, he envisioned a real ship, a sturdy vessel capable of braving the unpredictable ocean. Something strong enough, reliable enough to carry him back to civilization, back home. This powerful vision transformed into his singular obsession. It became his guiding star in the darkness of his predicament. He was acutely aware that building it would be a monumental, almost Herculean task. Perhaps to an outsider it would seem utterly impossible. But John focused on the almost. Almost isn't impossible. His first practical step was to establish a workshop. He needed a dedicated base of operations. He selected a spot near the shore, accessible to the water, but crucially safe from the destructive reach of high tides and storm surges. He began to clear the chosen area. This was back-breaking work, demanding pure sweat and straining muscle. He needed a robust shelter for his ambitious project, a way to protect his materials and early construction from the harsh tropical sun and the sudden torrential rain. He skillfully used large palm fronds for roofing and strong, straight branches for the framework. It was basic, primitive even, but it was a significant start. This small clearing, this humble shelter, became his command center. From this very spot, he would launch his determined campaign against the crushing weight of isolation. Timber was the absolute backbone of his ambitious plan. The ship he envisioned required strong, resilient wood, capable of withstanding the immense pressures of the open sea. So, John began to scout the dense interior of the island. This was dangerous terrain, fraught with hidden pitfalls, slippery slopes, and potentially hostile wildlife. He searched for tall, straight trees, specifically hardwoods known for their durability. He would test them carefully, tapping the trunks to sound them out, listening for the solid ring of healthy wood. This one is good, he'd think. That one, unfortunately, is too soft or shows signs of rot. He meticulously marked his chosen trees. It felt like a silent, respectful contract he was making with the ancient forest. He possessed no modern tools for this colossal task. Only a crudely sharpened rock, the controlled power of fire, and his own sheer, unyielding will. Felling a large, mature tree with such basic, primitive tools was an incredibly brutal process. It meant days, sometimes weeks, of relentless chipping and scraping away at the massive trunk. He learned to use fire with great care, building small, controlled blazes at the base of the tree to weaken the wood fibers. It was agonizingly slow work. His hands quickly became raw and blistered. His muscles ached with a deep, burning fatigue he had never known before. But each small chip of wood that fell to the ground was a tiny victory, a step closer to his goal. He had to be constantly vigilant. A falling tree of this size could be an instant killer. He carefully planned the direction of each tree's fall. He would listen intently to the creaks and groans of the wood, signs that it was close to giving way. Then finally the mighty reverberating crash, a giant of the forest, subdued by one determined man. John understood he needed much more than just large, unshaped logs. His ship design called for precisely shaped planks for the hull and strong curved ribs to form its frame. The question was, how could he possibly make them with his limited resources? He thought long and hard. He observed the natural world around him. He tried to remember stories of old ways, ancient techniques. He experimented with splitting logs using hardwood wedges, painstakingly driven into the grain. He also learned to use controlled fire, not just for felling, but for carefully shaping the wood. It was a painstaking, labor-intensive process. He also knew he needed rope, incredibly strong rope. He discovered certain fibrous vines growing in the jungle. He harvested them, then painstakingly twisted and wove them together, testing their strength again and again until he was satisfied. His island workshop slowly began to fill with these hard-won raw materials. Sealant was absolutely crucial for the success of his vessel. A leaky boat in the vastness of the open ocean, that was a terrifying thought, a virtual death sentence. He diligently searched the island for natural resins. Pine trees, if he could find them, would be his best bet for sticky, waterproof sap. He carefully tapped the ones he located. He collected the precious sticky substance drop by drop. It was a messy, time-consuming task. He then began to experiment, mixing the collected resin with other natural materials he found on the island. Perhaps he could add fine plant fibers to give it more body and strength. He created small test batches of his concoctions. He applied them to pieces of wood. He waited. Would this homemade sealant hold? Would it effectively keep the relentless water out? Every single detail mattered immensely. The keel was finally laid. This was the very first bone, the foundational piece of his future freedom. He selected a huge, straight log. It had been carefully chosen from his stockpile, the best of the best. He maneuvered it into position on his rudimentary slipway. This was it. This single act felt like the point of no return. As the keel settled, John felt a powerful surge of focused energy, but alongside it, a cold wave of fear washed over him. The sheer scale of the project, now truly beginning, was immense, almost overwhelming. He was just one man, alone, pitted against the formidable odds of nature and isolation. But he forcefully pushed the fear down. He had to. He focused intently on the immediate task. One step at a time, secure the keel, make it strong. Building the frame of the ship was the next monumental stage. This involved crafting the ribs that would give the vessel its shape and strength. Each individual rib had to be shaped meticulously by hand. Some pieces he managed to bend by carefully steaming them over a controlled fire, a tricky and often frustrating process. Other, more complex curves had to be painstakingly carved from solid pieces of wood. This part of the construction demanded incredible precision and almost saintly patience. If the frame was weak or misaligned, the ship would undoubtedly fail in the open ocean. He measured and remeasured constantly. He used lengths of his homemade vine rope as measuring tapes. He used his own hands, his own keen eye as his guide. He worked tirelessly from the first light of sunrise until the last light of sunset. Slowly, agonizingly, the skeleton of the ship began to take form. It looked like a strange, beached beast on the sands. Challenges, as expected, hit hard and without warning. A sudden violent squall swept in from the sea one afternoon. The wind howled like a banshee. Rain lashed down with incredible force. John fought desperately to protect his precious work. He scrambled to cover the exposed frame with woven palm leaf mats he had prepared for such an eventuality. He worked to secure any loose timbers that could be blown away or damaged. Despite his best efforts, the angry sea surged higher than usual and reclaimed a significant section of his carefully collected woodpile. It was a crushing setback. It tested his spirit to its very core. For a brief moment he felt a wave of despair threaten to engulf him, but only for a moment. He would not surrender. He rebuilt. He made his defenses stronger this time. He learned a harsh lesson from the storm. He would not be beaten by the elements. Ingenuity became John's greatest and most reliable weapon in this solitary battle. He had no nails, a fundamental component for boat building. So he learned to make sturdy wooden pegs, whittling them to perfection from dense hardwood. He drove them tight into pre-drilled holes, creating surprisingly strong joints. He possessed no saw for cutting planks. So he adapted, using sharp-edged flints and a laborious process of rubbing with abrasive sand and water. It was incredibly slow, muscle-aching work, but it worked. He devised a simple but effective lever system to help him move the immensely heavy logs. He used rocks as counterweights, applying basic principles of physics he vaguely remembered. His mind was constantly working, analyzing, problem-solving, adapting to each new hurdle. This island was a harsh and unforgiving teacher, but John was proving to be a remarkably fast and resilient learner. Planking the hull was a true marathon of endurance and precision. Each individual plank had to be carefully cut to size, meticulously shaped to fit the curve of the ribs, and then painstakingly fitted into place. The gaps between the planks had to be absolutely minimal to ensure a watertight seal. He used his homemade resin-based sealant generously, pushing it deep into every tiny crack and seam. He worked his way up the frame, inch by painstaking inch, plank by plank. The ship slowly began to look less like a skeleton and more like a proper enclosed vessel. It was becoming solid. He could almost feel the sturdy deck beneath his feet, imagine the mast reaching for the sky. The tropical sun beat down relentlessly. Thirst was a constant, nagging companion. But the end, the glorious end of this mammoth task, was finally in sight, urging him onward. His ship now needed a mast and a sail to catch the wind. This meant venturing back into the forest to find more tall, straight and exceptionally strong trees, more shaping, more carving. The mast in particular had to be incredibly strong. It would bear the full power of the ocean winds. For the sail, he pondered his options. Perhaps years ago, when he first wrecked, he had managed to salvage some scraps of durable canvas from the debris. If not, he faced the monumental task of weaving something substantial from tough plant fibers. This would be a huge, incredibly tedious undertaking. Stitching such a large piece together would require strong sinew, perhaps from animals he'd hunted, or fine yet robust cordage he'd have to make. Every single knot, every stitch had to be absolutely secure. The integrity of the sail was paramount. The day finally arrived. The ship was complete. It stood proudly on the shore, a magnificent testament to one man's unbending iron will and incredible perseverance. It was undeniably rough in its construction. It certainly wouldn't win any beauty contest when compared to vessels built in professional shipyards with proper tools and teams of workers. But it was his. Every single inch of it had been built with his own two hands. It was infused with his sweat, his determination, and even a little of his blood from countless small injuries. He looked at it and felt a profound mix of overwhelming pride and a deep sense of trepidation. The final, daunting challenge loomed large before him, launching this heavy, hand-built vessel into the waiting water. This would take every last ounce of his strength, all his accumulated cunning and island-learned engineering. He devised a rudimentary slipway using smooth, rounded logs as rollers, similar to how ancient civilizations might have moved great stones. He planned to use long, strong poles as levers to gain mechanical advantage. He waited patiently for the peak of the high tide, knowing the water would help him. Then, the moment came. Pushing, straining with every fiber of his being, the ship groaned in protest. It moved, just an inch at first, then slowly a foot. With a final desperate heave, it began to slide more freely. It was in the water. It floated. A raw, primal cheer escaped his lips, echoing across the empty beach. The ship, his ark of hope, bobbed gently on the waves. It was so much more than just wood and rope and resin. It was freedom. It was ultimate victory. It was irrefutable proof that the determined human spirit can conquer almost anything. The vast open sea awaited him.